Well, I think Washington understands the consequences of a possible war between India and Pakistan. The United States of Washington has been dealing with this region for since independence, 1947. They concluded defense pacts with Pakistan in the 1950s, which continued for quite some time. Then, during the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, we became a very close ally. Again, we worked with them in the war against terrorism. We still are, although it doesn't mean much anymore, but we still are a non-NATO US ally, which means that the nations who are closest to the United States but are not part of NATO are branded as non-NATO allies. So we are part of that arrangement. Although the relationship has downgraded since gradually since 2011, when Osama bin Laden was discovered in Abbottabad. And there came a time when it seemed as if Washington was pushing Pakistan further back. But then, during the last 3 or 4 years, I think both countries settled to a particular type of relationship, which means that not very close, but still good, cordial relations and cooperation in the fight against terrorism. That is the background of the relationship with Pakistan. They are also heavily involved with India now, although there was a time when India was not in the US camp, it was in the Soviet camp, but now India is very much needed in Washington. It is seen as a partner against China and India. Washington wants to use New Delhi, or wants to actually use, will be not an appropriate word, wants to have New Delhi on its side in its efforts to contain China. So that all this I gave you this background because this shows that the United States is not only aware of the developments in that region, but is also heavily involved in it. And therefore, having a war between India and Pakistan does not suit US interests, particularly because both are nuclear powers. I mean, I shouldn't power not in the sense that the Soviet Union or Americans were, but they still have nuclear weapons and they have large armies and they have been engaged in all sorts of conflicts and wars and cross-border attacks on each other. So they're not new to fighting, and both countries have the capability of taking this conflict to another level, which Washington obviously wants to avoid. And again, I mean, a war between two nuclear armed nations also has the potential of going nuclear. I mean, either side can use nuclear weapons, then that would be a disaster, not for the region, but for the entire world. So now I will take you back to history a little bit. I remember during the Kargil crisis, during the Kargil conflict, there came a time when India and Pakistan came very close to going to war against each other. And that was the time when Washington asked Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, who was then the Prime Minister in Pakistan, to come over to Washington. And he arrived there on 4th of July, which is a national holiday in the United States. That is their Independence Day. And on that very day, he met with Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif, persuaded him to withdraw those who had entered Kargil, and then President Clinton also spoke to, and people in his administration also spoke to their counterparts in India, and were able to de-escalate the situation and prevent a war between India and Pakistan. The Trump administration is a little different, but even this administration, when they came to power, people expected that probably Pakistan will again go back. So they played a key role in defeating the situation. And now the Trump administration is a bit different. their focus is somewhere else. They're more interested balancing what see as an trade imbalance between China and the United States and a host of other countries, including Pakistan. And they have introduced heavy, huge tariffs on various countries, particularly China. And then they're also busy in deporting illegal immigrants from the United States, despite their occupation, the preoccupation in these issues within the United States and with other nations. They did take notice of the situation that followed that terrorist attack in Pahalgam, and they did actually, as the State Department today confirmed, that they have been talking to both India and Pakistan. And yesterday, President Trump said in so many words that he believes that both India and Pakistan understand the situation and that he would be able to, and they would be able to contain it, indicating that India and Pakistan are not going to war over this. So I think the Trump administration, despite its preoccupation with other issues, is willing and involved in actually bringing down tensions in the subcontinent. But I would also like to point out something very interesting and I would say even alarming that happened during one of the State Department briefings last week, when the State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said that, while responding to a question, that yes, I will not respond to any query about the status of Jammu and Kashmir. No, the question was not even about that, but the statement indicated, or at least interpreted by at least the Indian media and some Pakistanis, as hinting that the United States may be reconsidering its position on the Jammu and Kashmir, on the Jammu and Kashmir dispute. As you know, the United States recognizes Kashmir, Jammu and Kashmir as a disputed territory. It recognizes UN resolutions on this issue, and it sees it as a region that still needs to be settled between India, as a dispute that still needs to be settled between India and Pakistan. Now, if it changes its position on the status of Kashmir, and use the word that I will not, I will get back to you later on this. Today, I'm not going to discuss the status of Jammu and Kashmir. So, if indeed, I don't know if I'm reading too much, if indeed they are actually reconsidering the status of Kashmir, then it is very alarming for us if the United States one day decides not to see Kashmir as a disputed territory, then it will have huge repercussions for Pakistan and for the Kashmiris. If the United States tries to persuade both India and Pakistan to be contented with whatever portion of Jammu and Kashmir they have, and then move on, that too will have huge implications for everybody. But perhaps I'm reading too much into that statement, but I found that the statement very interesting. There has been a shift of policy. Yeah, I would say a policy. There has been a policy shift. There has been a policy shift in Washington on both on their position towards India and Pakistan. Pakistan is no more as close an ally as it was. Pakistan is not as much needed as it once was. Now India is a closer ally. And there is a fact that we cannot and we should not ignore, that India is now also a huge economic power. All the nations in the world, including Muslim countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, are trying to build close trade partnership with India. They are trying to invest. They're investing actually already hugely in India, and therefore no country, including the United States, can now ignore India's economic power. So that has also changed the situation. India is now seen as economically seen in a different league. So that is there. Then the need to have India on their side to contain China also goes in India's favor. We were a close ally in a war against terrorism and against the Soviet Union, in a war which is which no longer is being fought. The war is over. That doesn't mean that Pakistan's status or Pakistan's position in that region is over. Pakistan is still a very important country. It is a country which has borders with Afghanistan. It is a country which has a huge border with India. It has borders with Iran. It is close to Central Asia. It's close to the Middle East. It is close to it is in South Asia, and therefore Pakistan cannot be ignored. Pakistan will always remain valid. Pakistan will also remain valid because China. It is useful for China, which wants to avoid direct conflict with India, and therefore Pakistan comes in handy as a country through which it can bring pressure on India without getting direct involved. There's a realization in Washington that if they bring too much pressure on Pakistan, then Pakistan it will push Pakistan deeper into the Chinese camp, and Washington does not want that. So Washington would also like to keep some relationship, some sort of relationship with Pakistan. Washington will also not like to see Pakistan going deeper into the Chinese camp. Washington also believes that a war that goes nuclear or a conflict that leads to territorial changes in South Asia would be bad for every country. It will create problems that will go beyond everybody's control. So I think that is why Washington, whether it likes it or not, it would try to maintain some sort of balance in dealing with both India and Pakistan. It's a very important question. How much pressure can the United States and the European Union bring, and China bring on India? China cannot bring any pressure on India. They are not even in. They do not even have very cordial relations. Also, they have, despite their differences, they have a large. I mean, they're trading partners. They export billions of dollars worth of goods. China exports to India, India exports goods to China, and all those things. But China still does not have the kind of pressure that could persuade India to do anything. America has good friendly relations with India. India enjoys that relationship. India wants to stay in the good books of America, but still India is a very large country. So America or Washington cannot bring that kind of pressure that it could do on Pakistan when they were very close allies, because Pakistan, in a way, economically and in defense and in other sectors, quite hugely depended on the United States. So Pakistan was more vulnerable. India is not. Similarly, India has very good relations with the European Union and everything, but the European Union can only do so much. It does not have the kind of influence that could force India to do anything. I think that is why major world powers, when they talk to India on this or other issues, they do keep India's point of view in mind, because India is not a country that they can actually force to do anything if India is not willing to go along with them. That doesn't mean that they do not have any influence in India. They do have influence. They can use that influence. They have enough influence to prevent a war, and they will use that influence to prevent a war. And I think there will hopefully be no war. But India is a large country, and therefore they have to deal with India very carefully. Nobody has the luxury of focusing on one issue only. Particularly if you are a superpower and you have taken upon the task of keeping peace in the world, if you want to be recognized as a power that has influence in every corner of this globe. So if you want to play that role, the role of superpower, so you have to be watching every development carefully. You have to play a role whenever something goes wrong. And obviously, the situation in South Asia is such that it can very easily go wrong. So despite America or Europe occupation with Ukraine and the conflict in Middle East, they would still be interested in influencing the situation in South Asia to an extent that they could prevent a war. And I think they realize that, and they are quietly, because India is not a country that they could actually publicly persuade to do anything. So they are involved. I think there is a lot of quiet diplomacy being done.